every new product and every M&A over the last number of years has been to fit into this vision. This is also the architectural destination for most of you in this virtual room today. Many vendors are getting on this bandwagon every day. So let's really take a look and break this down a bit and talk about what this really means, starting with the O. What does open really mean? Open means innovation is achieved faster than we ever could before. Open solves problems that any one company with a single company agenda might not do on their own. Open takes the best ideas from all perspectives and allows the best idea to win. Open just results in better, more innovative, more secure code. Let's talk about where and how this open movement began. Now, this first software program was executed at the University of Manchester on June 21st, 1948. Before that, software didn't even exist. Programming a computer at that time meant, in some cases, rewiring physical hardware, flipping switches, or punching cards. Each system was a new challenge that required a unique solution. The first programming languages brought consistency and efficiency to computing. That's what they were designed to do. The early software was typically free, but had many distribution limits around it. Fast forward to the 70s. Software became officially copyrightable, and later that decade, Microsoft and others won their legal battle to charge money for software, and thus began the path of purchasing proprietary software. At the same time, open source development was starting to get some interest, but it was mainly for hobbyists and niche players. By the 1980s, most enterprise software was proprietary. Collaboration across commercial software vendors was just non-existent or minimal at best. Some projects, like the operating system, were based on open source projects, but were mostly taken to the commercial world by proprietary vendors. For example, Unix development was being done in a quasi-open source way, but it was always taken to markets as a commercial set of products. Every hardware vendor had their own Unix operating system, and they added proprietary pieces. The OS would also only function on their boxes, and believe it or not, they all saw this as a lock-in feature, not a bug. Then something happened with an open source project called Linux, started by Linus Torvald. Like most open source, Linux started as a hobby group, but this hobby soon exploded into a massive worldwide project. Even Linus was surprised at how far and fast it took off. Several groups then tried to commercialize open source Linux. It wasn't until the introduction of enterprise-grade Linux that the Unix chokehold was finally broken. Let's face it, Red Hat had a lot to do with that. We focused on things in and around Linux, and more importantly in the upstream Linux project, that enterprises needed to run their business. Some companies and corporate users also started to focus in around Linux innovation. In fact, Linux became the innovation engine. This one project and community spawned hundreds, then thousands, then millions of open source projects. Open source moved far beyond Linux to span every piece of our IT world. All of this new innovation was built in and around Linux because Linux was so powerful and freely accessible. Open source software then started to be used by enterprises and governments. All of us here in this room helped with that amazing evolution, taking enterprise IT from proprietary to open, solving real problems that enterprises needed to be solved to run their businesses. For example, Linux and open source evolution led to virtualization. Open virtualization actually enabled cloud computing, which today unto itself is a multi-billion-dollar business. Linux is also the foundation of containers, which is core to next generation of cloud-native application development. Containers need to be orchestrated, so then came Kubernetes. And now this Linux-based innovation goes all the way out to the edge. Today, open source developed solutions are everywhere. It's the engine behind every government, every enterprise, and every organization. It's in our homes, it's in our cars. Open source software helps filmmakers make our favorite movies. It's part of the networks that runs ATMs and financial institutions. It's everywhere we go, planes, trains, and automobiles. Retail stores and government and healthcare services. Open source is the backbone of inventions that's changed our lives. Like the internet, even the development model continues to drive the internet. The open source development is driving the internet today and created the internet. Open source puts rockets into space. Open source runs the stock market. It helps doctors save lives. Today, every one of us touches open source on a daily basis. We all have an open source story. You may have heard from one of our proprietary friends attempting to come into the open source world that open source is their birthright. Open source is not any one person's or any one company's birthright. You have to earn it every day with the best technology because the best technology makes the best solutions. Collaborating together to solve the problem at hand is the best way, with no thought about what's best for one person or one company. It's all about community to reach the best technical solution. Some vendors have an open core or open components they claim to be open source. But really, is this really open source? I can answer that question pretty easy. The answer is no, this is not open source. With Red Hat, you have our absolute commitment that open source communities, the open source development model, in the open source way, that's where we began and that's where we stay. It's in our DNA. We just wouldn't know any other way. I know I took a lot of time on the O for open, but it really is important. It's the foundation of everything we are talking about here. We or the industry just wouldn't be where we are without it. So now let's move on to the H for hybrid. All of us live in a hybrid heterogeneous world. Everything we do is to help you succeed across what your IT environment looks like. Even from the beginning with RHEL, we took the approach that it's going to be a mixed world. We supported proprietary ISVs. We built on proprietary hardware. But what does hybrid really mean? Hybrid means meeting you wherever you are, helping you future-proof what you have today and what you're going to build for tomorrow. Hybrid is the reality for now and for a very long time to come. Just as we don't want to be locked in the software, we don't want to be locked in the closed infrastructure either. From bare metal and virtualized infrastructure in the data center to private cloud, public cloud, and even multiple public clouds all the way out to the edge, giving you the ability to run your applications on any footprint that makes sense for you with a common development, operations, and security platform and environment. Let's go through a little background on hybrid. In the beginning, our infrastructure was simple and very large. Mainframes, server rooms, private networks. Most, if not all, enterprise computing was done in this closed environment. Perhaps you scaled from one data center to a global footprint. We tried to follow a consistent blueprint back then, though. Everything in our IT environment was proprietary hardware and proprietary software. Homogeneous was to the vendor's benefit, not your benefit. It was very costly to you as the customer. It was costly from both a pure dollar perspective, but also from an innovation perspective. Having to rely solely on the vendor to introduce new innovation to you when they want it. Then things changed. The microprocessor, faster, smaller computing and processing. Moore's law rate of change. Hardware was now interchangeable, but mostly in the Windows world. And the software stack was still proprietary and mostly from one company. The same was true in the Unix world, where each vendor had their own version only running on their proprietary hardware. Linux again came to the rescue and leveled the playing field for the software stack, with commercial Linux running mission-critical workloads, new innovation developed in open source in and around Linux, as we've talked about. That new stack, built in and around Linux, sat on top of the commoditized microprocessor footprint. With these new open, powerful hardware and software stacks available, innovation accelerated like we had, enabling the enterprise to scale within their existing footprint, allowing applications to be built and deployed in new ways. And then the cloud was built on the foundation of Linux and open source virtualization. It's safe to say that the cloud just would not or could not have been built without the availability and power of Linux and open source, including the innovation that it spurred. And then enterprises began moving some of their workloads to the public cloud. Hybrid is now here to stay. We are running applications across physical, virtual, private, and multiple public cloud infrastructures. We, the industry, have been stitching all this together for years. It's very powerful, but it isn't true hybrid. Hybrid requires a common development, operations, security, and automation environment. This is essential in order to scale. Hybrid isn't a trend, it's a strategic imperative. Data and applications span across all of this. Applications must be delivered to every endpoint via multiple channels. Data must be generated, consumed, and acted upon across all of this infrastructure. This infrastructure must adapt to this changing digital world. Many other IT software vendors are attempting to add open innovation like Kubernetes to legacy environments. As we have said, the new technologies that are driving innovation today are community-led, open source developed, and developed in and around Linux. We learned this a long time ago. A strategy of everything above the line is open and everything below the line is closed, that's just a proprietary model. That just won't work for you, the customer, in this new open world. The proprietary guys will not succeed in bringing open source to their proprietary model that they used back in the 80s. Our success has been driven by our very early strategy that everything we do is open source based. Red Hat bridges traditional data center technologies to the hybrid cloud world. Because we have been in the data center for almost 20 years with this strategy is why we can do this. We can help you modernize existing applications and build new cloud-native applications using the same Kubernetes platform. You get to choose what infrastructure is right for you, what's right for your application across heterogeneous hybrid IT environments. Simply said, hybrid is the new data center, period. It's built on open technologies and it must be kept on open technologies, period. With that, let's lastly look at cloud. Not just cloud as an island, but how it relates to open and hybrid. Developers to build their apps with the services that the cloud can bring. We want to enable developers to build and deliver any app, anywhere, anytime. Applications should be able to move freely based on what is right for the business, with a consistent experience and operational controls, secure but flexible. Let's look at the history of cloud like we have with open and hybrid. The basic building blocks of cloud computing was ubiquitous networking. Cloud computing just wouldn't work without that. It all began in the 1960s. Project Mac, which included development of technology that would allow a computer to be used by two or more people simultaneously. In Internet, JCR envisioned a future where an intergalactic computer network would allow everyone on the planet to be interconnected via computers and be able to access information from anywhere. Hard to believe that just 50 years ago, this vision seemed impossible and even crazy to most people. Today, we rely on the internet in our everyday lives, just as we are today to attend this gathering. In the 90s, the cloud and this new computing paradigm really took hold, primarily with software as a service, like hosted software from companies like Salesforce. From an infrastructure standpoint, the early cloud-like experience was when someone else hosted our hardware. It was still ours, but managed by someone else. Our data centers could be co-located with other companies, saving us time, cost, and management costs. We were then able to consume applications that lived outside our firewall, managed by someone else. In 2006, Amazon started Elastic Compute Cloud hosted software, allowing others to use their excess data center infrastructure. And AWS was born. AWS is secretive about how big their data center footprint is, but in 2016, it was estimated that they had over 1.3 million servers and were adding hundreds to thousands more daily. What we do know is their annual revenue, which is $40 billion with 30% growth in FY19. Originally used mostly for dev and test, but eventually production apps there as well, and that's what we see today. From software as a service, to infrastructure as a service, to platform as a service, and today you can get nearly anything as a service. Back then, cloud providers said that every app would be moving. Public cloud has become a part of most enterprises' architecture. Today, cloud is more how we consume technology in a seamless way. Cloud today extends from on-premise to multiple public clouds and all the way out to the edge. Edge is the most important piece of the hybrid cloud. With Edge, we are putting computing closer to users and the data. In the hybrid model, the user should not have to worry or frankly care about where the cloud is or which cloud it is. For all of us running the infrastructure, we should be able to choose the right cloud or on-prem technology for the right application. We should be able to have the agility and portability to move data, workloads, and management wherever it needs to be, whenever we want. What I just went through is really open hybrid cloud. It's what we have been building in and around our platforms for many, many years. Open hybrid cloud is what we are delivering to our customers and building with our partners every day, today and tomorrow. I want to thank you all so much for coming to see us today. Even though we're in these interesting times, we so appreciate you coming to hear our story. Have a great day, stay well, and I hope to really see you soon.